A hobby will be fine long term, but in order for that to happen, a few things need to change. Now, that's going to be the discussion for today's video. This is off the back of two reels that Cage Lawyer shared on Instagram with regards to why the hobby is going to be fine long term. So the first video is this one here, where he basically released this 5 weeks ago and said, you know what, the hobby will be fine because you're seeing things like this at every card show you go to, or at least almost every card show. You're going to see tables like this with, senior dealers essentially having binders and binders of cards on the table for people to try and complete their sets. And basically alluded to, these guys are passionate about cards. This is why it's going to be fine long term, which, is true, right? In any card show you go to, generally you're going to see this in some capacity. Now, the commentary you're seeing on this is quite positive in the sense that a lot of people say, you know what, this is what the hobby is all about. These guys are passionate. These guys are the backbone of the hobby. The hobby is fine for this reason. But for almost every one of those comments, you saw a handful more talking about how there was no young kids at this table, right? It looks like the old guys, and the young kids don't care about things in the same way. And what means the hobby is not going to be fine long term because these young kids don't care about it the same way, these guys do. And I think that point is pretty valid. But Cage basically saw that on his video from 5 weeks ago. Apologies for the audio there. But he released this video today about 17 hours ago now, and essentially said, you know what, yeah, you guys are right in the sense that these guys do collect cards in this way, but they're passing the torch to the new generation, and the new generation approach it by doing things like this. And you're seeing this, all over social media. You're seeing this all over the card shows. You're seeing this at all card shops and trade nights, so on and so forth, where these young groups of guys are getting together, or groups of young guys, I should say, with their slabs, with their carriers, and so on and so forth, and they're trading slabs, selling slabs, flipping them, wheeling and dealing, all that sort of stuff. And from that perspective, they're passing the torch to these guys, and this is also the reason why the hobby is going to be fine long term. But that's what I want to talk to today, because I think in order for that to happen, a few things need to change with regards to the sentiment and the mindset of this new generation in order for the hobby to be fine long term. Now, I'm not hating on anything with regards to this. I just want to share my thoughts. You can share them down in the comments below as well, and then we'll chat through it as we always do. Now, it's interesting because, like I said, they are passing the torch to these guys, and it's fantastic to see these young kids sort of wheeling and dealing. But the sentiment and the passion behind why they're doing it is very, very different. And for that reason is why I think, the hobby, it will be fine long term, but things will need to change, right? Because the way things are going are not very good. These guys are doing it primarily, and when I say guys, I mean the young guys we saw in that second video, doing it to flip, doing it to invest. They don't approach it from a collector's mindset. And there is nothing wrong with that, right? So please don't, come at me for that. But there's a passion behind it that's kept cards alive. And those guys out of the set collectors that have been doing this for 20, 30, 40, 50, 60 plus years have been doing so and chasing these things because they truly love it, right? They loved it as kids. They love collecting. It's all about collecting. I'm 32, I'll be 33 in a week. And it was the same for me, even though I'm much younger than most of them. It was the same for me growing up in the 90s, whether it was Pokemon cards, Tarzos, or Pogs, as you called them in the States, video games, as you can see behind me, got like comic books down there, Dragon Ball Z cards, all this sort of stuff, right? I'm a collector first and foremost, so the passion is there for me, right? I'm going to buy cards regardless. But this new generation, the focus, as we discussed, in that infamous Whatnot booth at the National, I'll probably put a pop-up now, where every kid that was interviewed, they talked about the art of the deal. They talked about the flip. That was the thing they liked the most. That was the reason why they're buying and selling cards. And, I'm not speaking for everyone, but it seems to be the vast majority have that mindset. And the question comes, well, if they keep doing it for that purpose, if cards all of a sudden don't become as popular as they are now, they don't maintain that popularity, or they don't maintain those prices, because they're not out there, buying it with the passion to keep and collect, does that mean that sentiment's going to change? And when it does change, does that mean they're going to leave the hobby and the hobby's going to have no underlying foundation to support it? Because I think, those older generation, right, those guys that are the set collectors, they're the foundation for the hobby, and they have been for so long, because they're not necessarily the guys that are out there chasing product hits. They're not necessarily the guys that are out there, buying the product themselves, especially over the last 3 years, because, they've been priced out. So what happens when the product gets bought and the product hits get hit? These are the guys that are still out there buying it to complete their sets, to complete their PCs, to chase their team sets, their league sets, so on and so forth. They've got the passion out there to continually do that. So without that foundation for that love for these cards, by the time the hits are gone, they're the ones that are funneling in the money consistently. If that goes, right, because this new generation only cares about flipping, what does that mean? And I know I'm essentially casting a big net when I say this young generation, but, I think it's a fairly safe assessment to make. But, I'm not hating on it either, but the thing that, needs to change is that sentiment. These young guys, they need to sort of shift back towards focusing in and buying and flipping and selling what they actually care about. Because number one, that's going to protect them when it comes to, from an investment perspective, right? Because they're buying what they know to an extent. They care about what they're buying. It means they're more involved. They're not going to get burnt as easily. But at the same time, they're not going to end up a position in like what we're seeing with soccer cards right now in regards to that Jeff Wilson interview we spoke about in my weekly news video recently, where he was interviewing someone, I forget who it was, Attire Sports, I think it was, or something along those lines, where they spoke about the soccer card market. And he spoke about in that video how he didn't care about soccer, so the cards are not going to be valuable long term. And then you saw in the comments, and you also saw in these like card show vlogs about soccer cards, where people are talking about buying soccer cards, but not actually caring. They don't actually care about the card, so they're buying it and then complaining when the market tanks, right? And that sentiment is pretty widespread because everybody's doing it. And as I say in that video, you need to be a little bit careful doing that because everybody thinks the same. We're all like-minded individuals, right? Because we like sports cards, we generally like other things too. We follow the same influencers, and we probably watch the same movies, like the same music to an extent, all this sort of stuff, because we, all buy into this same little ball of like things we like, right? Chances are when you yourself have a change in mindset about what you like and what you don't like, chances are everyone's going to have the same thing around the same time. So all of a sudden, if you're buying things that you don't actually care about and then you try and sell it, everybody's going to have the same sort of mindset, essentially, which means what? The price is going to come down, really, really quickly, which is, a really scary thought when you factor in what the hobby might look like in 20 or 30 years. Now, again, I'm not hating on anything, but that's sort of where the trend is going. And I just want to make sure, clear that I'm not hating, right? It's just, okay, the hobby's going to be fine long term, right? Because kids are passionate. It's good to see them being so passionate about the art of the deal, right? Because it's fantastic to see young kids doing that sort of stuff. But if you don't actually care about the cards in hand and you care more about the quick flip than anything else, what does that mean long term? So in terms of change that we need for the hobby to be fine long term, it's that element. Get back to buying what you love. Focus in on buying the things you're actually passionate about. Focus in on this one area that you do know. And then obviously you can branch out and do other things. But if your mindset is the quick flip, and that's the only reason why you're buying the cards, so you're buying things, you're exposing yourself to financial risk unnecessarily, right? Or you're going to these card shows because you want to make money. And that's, again, okay to do. But that's only going to last for so long, right? What's going to happen if that is the consistent mindset across everybody else, that love to get that quick flip is not there anymore, or the opportunity to get that quick flip is not there anymore because the older generation is no longer there to buy the foundation, not there to keep the house of cards, steady and rigid. They go away, right? Are people going to care about cards in the same way? Who knows? When you talk about print runs as well, is that going to impact things long term? When you go back to when I was a kid, even well before then, obviously, you bought the card, you play with the card, you didn't even put it in a sleeve. Same with Pokemon cards and that sort of stuff. So the reason why they're super valuable now is because nobody took care of them then. And I know this is not rocket science, me talking about this, right? But you're buying a card today and you're putting in a slab, you're putting in a one touch, you're putting in a top loader instantly. And then it's going to stay perfect. And you're talking about the same sort of print runs. There's so many products. There's so many cards out of 10 now, out of 1, so many 1-of-1s in a product. All these things, everybody's keeping them mint and perfect. Like in 10, 20 years' time, is it going to hold value? Is it rare? And I guess that's the point I'm trying to make. So please share your thoughts down in the comments below. Again, I'm not hating, right? I think it's fantastic, but in terms of the things that need to change in order for the hobby to be fine long term, it's that change in sentiment. It's that change in, passion. We need to get that passion back. We need this new generation to actually be passionate about collecting. Because without collecting, without these true collectors, the hobby, it will be fine long term. It's always going to be around, but we're not going to see it at the heights we're seeing right now. It's not going to keep going on this trajectory that we're seeing right now, especially if this foundation is gone. Now, I don't want to be seen as a boomer or old guy hating on the new guys coming in because I think it's fantastic once again, right? But this mentality, it needs to change in order for the hobby to be very fine long term. Now, again, I think most people will probably agree with me based on the comments I've seen. But if you've got a differing view or more things you think I should add, please share it down in the comments below. I had a bunch more things in my mind, but they've all slipped me right now. I've forgotten them. So please forgive me. But it's, again, I think a very interesting discussion because to an extent, these guys are passing the torch, right? They are passing the torch. But the reason for being passionate about cards is very, very different. And I think that reason may be a really good indicator for why the hobby might not be fine long term. So if people can get back to being passionate about cards, be back to, reeling in, right, pulling in the reins of, okay, maybe not chasing everything and anything to make a quick buck, or just being a bit more sensible with things, or, just being passionate about collecting sets again. I think that's going to do more for the hobby long term than, the way things are going, because if these older collectors keep getting priced out the way that they are, and we keep seeing the QC errors that we're currently seeing. It's like, why do we expect things to be okay long term when people don't look like they care about cards in the same way that the previous generation did? So it is what it is. Again, I'm not hating on anything. I'm not hating on either side. I think, those young kids and the older generation are both on the same spectrum, right? You both do love cards. You're just on opposite extreme ends. It's just whether, like I said, this new generation cares enough about cards, the underlying care about cards, to maintain them, long term. Because like that interview we saw with Jeff Wilson, so many people are investing in F1. So many people are investing in, soccer, and they don't actually care about the sport. So they're losing money there. If all of a sudden they start losing money on the pillars like NBA, NFL, MLB, what's going to happen then? They don't care about collecting. What's going to happen? So it's fine for me. I'm a true collector. Like, I've been collecting my whole life, and I'm not saying that to sit on my ivory tower, right? I'm not anyone special, but I'm always going to be around, right? I love to collect things like Flawless Soccer. It's such an underrated set. Can't see the card in question. But I love this stuff. It's cheap. It's game worn. It's on card autos. It's really rare for soccer. People sleep on that stuff. People sleep on the wrong things. And if they keep sleeping on the wrong things as well, what does that mean long term? So again, went on a bit of tangent there towards the end of the video. But like I said, I'll reiterate one more time because I love to repeat myself, as you guys do know. If you are, in the hobby and you want to know what it's going to be like long term, the thing that needs to change is bring back the passion, bring back the love. The young guys can do that. It's going to be fine long term. If they can't, who knows, might be a little bit scary if you are holding a lot of money in cards, because, yeah, it is what it is. Pretty self-explanatory. Thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next one. Cheers.